Welcome everybody to Sterling Silver Intermediate Yoga. My name is Katie Luvat, and I'm excited you're all here with me today, whether you're here at the Yoga Center in Midtown or you are joining us from home. Glad you're here. There is a list of props in the chat, so you can take a look there and assemble what you can. And if you don't have everything, don't fret. I always have ideas for things you can use, like for a yoga strap, you could use like a bathrobe tie, or for, if you don't have a block, sometimes a big book will do. Towels make do for if you don't have a yoga blanket, but also just blankets or throw blanket around the house works. As always, I'm going to invite everyone to keep one of the main ethical principles of yoga in mind as you're moving through your practice today, and that is the practice of ahimsa, which is the practice of non-harm. And so we can think about that physically for our bodies as you're moving through the practice. If there's something I ask you to do and it doesn't feel good in your body, or that might not be a good idea for you, please know that you can say no thank you, and you can come out of any shape at any time. If you need to take a break, and I haven't asked you to take a break, trust your instinct. You are your best teacher. I don't know what it feels like inside of your body. Okay. So all of that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. And today we're going to start lying down on our backs. And if you lie down and your forehead is lower than your chin, like you lay down on your back, and you notice that your forehead is a lot lower than your chin, you might slide a blanket underneath your head until your forehead and chin are level. And that's just, sometimes that happens because our thoracic spine, the part of the spine that's attached to our rib cage, it has a natural curve. It's a convex curve, it curves out. But over time, all of the stuff that we do out in front of us pulls the head forward of the spine. And that part of the spine can become a little bit more pronounced, or if you have osteoporosis, osteopenia, there can actually be fractures that have happened inside of the spine. The spine starts to change shape. And when you lie down on your back, if that thoracic curve is more pronounced, when you put your head back, your cervical curve will be more pronounced and in more of a hyperextension. So that blanket just brings that neck back into a more neutral position. Thanks for listening. Okay, let's go ahead and lie down and plant your feet on the floor. And again, if you would like to put a blanket under your head, if that feels like a good idea for you, even just a low blanket, go right ahead and do that for yourself. And then take a moment arriving in your body. You can close your eyes if you feel like it. You could just soften your gaze. And take a moment to check in with yourself. Feel the body on the ground. And in fact, allow the knees to bend so that your feet can be planted on the ground and you can feel the ground under your feet. And feel the back of the pelvis resting on the ground, and the back of the shoulders and the back of the skull. And notice all of the parts that are touching the ground, the back of the arms, the low back ribs, perhaps. And then notice where you're not touching the ground. Maybe there's a little breezeway underneath the waistband where your lumbar curve lifts away from the floor. Maybe there's a little breezeway underneath the back of your neck where the cervical spine curves away from the floor when you're neutral. And then bringing your hands to your abdomen. So the hands rest on the belly, and just feeling as you tune into your breath, whatever movement is present under your hands, the belly lifting and falling. And as you bring your awareness to the breath, you could deepen the breath. You could move the exhales out more completely. You could draw the next inhale in more fully. And as the breath deepens, maybe the belly moves a little bit more, but you don't need to push the belly into your hands or pull it back toward the spine. Just feel how it moves as you gradually deepen your breath. And then move your hands to the base of the rib cage and feel the movement of the rib cage under the hands, how it might lift up and spread out and back into the floor under you as the breath moves in, and how the ribs narrow and settle as the breath moves out. And then bringing your fingertips underneath your collarbone. So feel for where your collarbones are. They're the kind of the bony horizontal bones right at the upper chest. And if you slide your fingers just under them, they're on the upper chest, and feel how the chest moves with your breath that's deepening. The longer, more thorough exhales, feeling how maybe the chest falls down. And as you inhale and deepen that inhale, feeling the chest lifting and maybe even spreading away from the sternum. The chest kind of has a hinging movement. Sometimes you can feel that as the breath deepens. Hinges up toward the face, settles down away from the face with the inhale and exhale. Good. And then let your hands relax alongside your hips. And with your next inhale, rock your tailbone into the floor so that the lower back arches away from the ground just a little bit more. And then on your exhale, pull your pelvic rim into the ground so that your lower back flattens. And go back and forth between those 2 points. You're going to rock toward your tailbone, the low back arches away from the ground, inhaling. And as you exhale, pulling your that posterior pelvic rim, the back pelvic rim into the ground, you'll feel your low back flatten, the lumbar spine flattens. So feeling also the pelvis is moving, but notice how that movement comes all the way up the spine. And if you think about your head being that last spinal vertebra, feel how the head moves. The chin drops, the chin lifts. As that pelvis tips and tucks, the spine is rooted in your pelvis, which means that during the day, depending on how you're carrying your pelvis, it's going to affect how your spine is curving. Now, on your next exhale, can you rock your left leg into your chest? And your hands can go on top of the shin, or they could hook underneath the crook of the knee. And let's slide the right leg out long as that's okay for your lower back. And you can roll your left ankle around in a few circles, just trying to wake up that ankle a little bit, go the other direction. And for some of you, you might feel this in your hamstrings, this stretch. For some of you, you might feel how it's actually kind of soothing and releasing if you have a tight lower back. And then hold on to the left leg with your left hand, and your right hand, can you place it on your right hip, on the front of your right hip, just so that you remember to keep that hip nice and grounded. And then draw the left leg out to the left so that you get maybe a little stretch up the inner left groin. And then bring the left leg back to the center, and then just go out and back a few times. Like you're just trying to warm up those inner thigh muscles, and by moving the femur in its socket this way, lubricating the hip socket. The pelvis isn't moving. We're just moving the femur in the socket. You're trying to keep the left hip and the right hip nice and even on the floor. And then when you're ready, bring the leg back in. Take your hands or a strap behind your left thigh and begin to flex your left foot and reach your left heel into the sky, stretching the back of the leg open, and then point your foot and bend your knee. Go back and forth this way a few times. I like to inhale to straighten the leg and flex the foot. And I exhale to point the foot and bend the knee. And in that way, I turn this movement into a moving meditation, trying to connect my movement with my breath. Now, I'll tell you one cool thing about this very simple movement that we're doing is that there's this humongous nerve that runs from your spinal column. It passes out through your sacroiliac joint. So think about where your sacrum is on the back of your pelvis. There's this nerve, your sciatic nerve, that crosses underneath in between the sacrum and the pelvis. And it runs down the whole length of the back of the leg to the foot. And this simple movement that we're doing right now, flexing the foot, straightening the knee, pointing the foot, bending the knee, helps to floss that nerve. That nerve sometimes gets impinged under some of our deep gluteal muscles and hamstrings. And when it does, it can create a lot of discomfort in the leg or in the hip or in the foot. So anyway, let's do 2 more of these. And you can also feel how strengthening it is, right around the knee joint, the quads engaging, the lower leg muscles engaging, the calves, the tibialis anterior, really good movement. Now keep the leg reaching into the sky and slowly roll your ankle around in circles like you're painting circles on the ceiling with your toes, but go slower than you think you should go, or than your impulse is to go. Slow it down even more and go really slow and feel those muscles at work in the lower leg that are helping you take your foot around in these circles. Feel the stretching sensations. And maybe some of you are getting a Charlie horse through some of the range of motion. So I apologize if that happened. And then when you're ready, release your hold on the leg. So the hands release. We're going to plant your right foot on the floor again. Your left leg still reaching up into the air. Feel your low back ribs on the ground and keep them grounded, and slowly lengthen and lower your left leg all the way down to the ground. So it's long, it lowers all the way down. And then drag your left heel toward your sit bone. Rock your left thigh back into your chest and reach your left leg back into the sky. And then lower that leg down again. So we're just doing that over and over again. You're dragging the heel in, you're stretching the leg into the sky, you're slowly lengthening and lowering that leg toward the floor, trying to keep the pelvis quiet, trying to keep your back ribs broad and connected to the ground. And this is a nice way to strengthen our hip flexors, the muscles that cross over the front of the hips that get really tight and weak when we sit a lot. So this is a really sweet way to lengthen them and strengthen them at the same time. One more time, up and down. And when that leg gets to the ground, you're just going to bend it and plant your left foot on the floor, and then rock your right thigh into your chest and give it a hug. And slide your left leg out nice and long, and roll your right ankle around in slow circles, and feel your breath and feel your body on the ground. It's a nice day to be close to the ground when it's hot outside. And then roll the ankle around in a few other directions, the one other direction. And then when you're ready, the left hand finds your left hip, and you're going to keep that left hip grounded. And the right leg gets to slowly draw across to the right. So you're opening the right knee away from the midline, but trying not to roll off of your left hip. And then draw the right leg back to the center and just go back and forth a few times. Feel what the texture of that right hip is like today. Back and forth. Back and forth. And when you get back to the center, pause and catch your right thigh. Flex your right foot, and with an inhale, reach your heel into the sky, opening up the back of the leg, pointing the right foot and then bending the knee and going back and forth with your breath. So, one of the things we practice in yoga is trying to cultivate our attention, our ability to be present with ourselves, to concentrate. And sometimes what happens is just by noticing or trying to stay present, what we end up noticing is the tendency, the very human tendency for the mind to wander. And when we notice the mind is somewhere else, making our grocery list or, you know, thinking about a conversation we had earlier in the day, to notice and say, oh, how human of me, and then just come back to what you were doing, inhaling to straighten the leg and flex the foot, exhaling to point the foot and bend the knee. And then when you're ready, reach that leg into the sky and turn, keep it there, just roll that ankle again around in circles. Think about painting circles on the ceiling with your toes. Nice and slow in one direction a couple times, and then the other direction, and go even slower when you change directions. No hurrying. Good, and then keep that leg, the leg in the air, the foot flexed. Bend your left knee, plant your left foot on the floor. Take your arms down alongside your hips and feel your back ribs broad and connecting to the ground, and just start to lengthen and lower the right leg down toward the ground slowly, like you're trying to reach it out of your hip socket. And when the heel touches down, drag the heel toward your sit bone, rock the thigh back in and reach the leg into the sky. Maybe that's inhale, and exhaling, lengthening and lowering. And inhaling, rocking the leg back in and up into the sky. And exhaling, slowly lengthening, lowering the leg down. Now, if I tell you to breathe in a certain way and it works for you, great. And if I tell you to breathe in a certain way and you're finding that you're gasping for breath and I'm guiding you too slowly, or you've run out of breath and you're not to the next part of the movement, don't worry about it. Just take a breath where you need a breath. Okay, so one more nice big movement of that right leg into the sky and that slow lowering of it. And then eventually plant both of your feet on the ground. So your feet are aligned with each other. They're about hip width apart. And find a block, please. Sorry, that might mean that you have to come out of this very carefully placed foot position. Grab your block, lie back down, and place the block between your thighs. Now, for David, we're going to be bridging. We're going to be moving in and out of bridge pose. And for you, I think what I'm going to have you do is not lift your hips up very high. You're going to stay really low, and that's going to allow you to work the back of the legs and your gluteal muscles and keep your head lower than your heart. Now, everybody, go ahead and grab the block between your thighs. And before we start to think about lifting the hips up and bridging, let's just activate our inner legs a little bit. So everyone, feel your pelvis on the ground and see if you can find neutral pelvis. When you're there, you're going to have a little breezeway underneath your lower back, and your low back ribs will feel like they're kind of spilling toward the floor. And see if you can maintain that. We're going to inhale, and on your exhale, press your inner legs into the blocks about 30% of your effort. So it's not really hard. Pause for an inhale, hold on to that effort, keep your spine and pelvis nice and neutral, and on your next exhale, add 10%, hug the block a little bit more. And hold that for another inhale. And exhale, hug the block 10% more without tucking the tail, without flattening the back. And then inhale, relax, release that effort, and let everything settle for a second. We're going to do that 2 more times. So on your exhale, hug your inner legs into the block, maybe this time 40%. Pause and inhale. Exhale, firm the legs into the block a little more. This is another movement that can be really helpful if you suffer from sciatica. Pause for your inhale. Exhale, hug the block a little bit more. Careful, you're not flattening your low back. You're not overarching it. You're just hugging that block. You're turning your inner leg muscles on. And then relax and take a breath. Everything relaxes. And one more time, hug the block with your exhale. Pause for the inhale. Exhale, hug it a little bit more. The hips aren't off the ground. They're still on the ground. Inhale, exhale, hug it a little bit more. And inhale, relax. And pull the block out for a second. And if it's okay for you to let your legs open away from each other, do. So this is a reclined cobbler's pose. Some of you might feel like you have to support your legs with your hands, but giving those inner legs a little stretch and feeling even your pelvic floor relaxed and taking a breath here. Good, and then bring the legs back to the center, replace the block, and we're gonna hug the block for bridge pose, but we're not going to grip it really, really hard, but find that even pressure. Your right leg and your left leg evenly find the block. Now take your arms, 90-degree bend at the elbows, bring the back of the upper arms to the floor and firm down the back of the shoulders, the back of the arms to the elbow tips. Keep the front ribs soft. On an exhale, imprint your pelvic rim into the ground so that low back arch disappears. Now start to push your feet down and begin to peel your tailbone off of the ground, and then your pelvis comes off of the ground, and maybe your first few lumbar vertebrae come up, and that's as low as David goes, and then everybody else might come up a little higher, upper lumbar, thoracic, and then lower down slowly. So the thoracic spine comes down, the low back ribs come down, the upper lumbar vertebra, the lower lumbar vertebra, and then the pelvis, and then your lumbar curve returns. Take a deep breath in. Let's do it again. Exhale, imprint your pelvic rim down. You'll feel your low abdomen engage. Press the arms, press the feet down, hug the block, begin to peel tailbone, sacrum, lumbar, thoracic up off the ground. Think about reaching your knees toward your toes, and then exhale, lower the spine down slowly, vertebra by vertebra. Good. When the pelvis comes down, let the low back arch again. Inhale, exhaling, imprint the pelvic rim down. So we're trying to mobilize our spine a little bit, and we're trying to wake up our gluteal muscles and the hamstrings. We're keeping the front ribs nice and soft. We're not coming up really, really high. Okay, we're just trying to imagine that if the spine were a pearl necklace, keep going like in your own pace, that you're lifting one pearl at a time off of the mat, and then you're setting it down one pearl at a time. And if you're getting a Charlie horse, it's because you're actually getting your hamstrings to fire, probably in a way that they're not used to. So stretch it out and then start again when you need to. You doing okay, Pamela? All right. Yeah, is it bothering your sciatica? Are you getting a Charlie horse, like a cramp? That's uncomfortable, but not uncommon, and not your sciatica. So you're not alone, I imagine. You just take a moment and stretch it out. Now, when we get back up, this next time when you find your bridge pose, and again, David, you're staying a little lower, and then everybody else, you're coming up. We're not coming up really high. We're just trying to get the hips up. We're trying to maybe get to the low back ribs. And we're reaching the thighs toward the knees, and we're hugging the thighs into the block, and you're pressing the back of the arms down and the soles of the feet down, the big toe ball, the pinky toe ball, and the heel. Take 2 more breaths here. And then when you're ready, release and come all the way down. Pull the block out from between the legs. Give your knees a hug. Rock the legs from side to side. And then when you're ready, roll over onto your left side and spiral your way up. Here we are. Good. We're going to come to sitting with your legs just stretched out in front of you for a second and sitting up nice and tall. And if you want, you can sit on a blanket if that gives you a little height. Sitting, you'll immediately feel upright with your legs stretched out in front of you is probably feeling kind of nice on your hamstrings, that we're just doing a lot of activation and lifting you up and down. So just let the legs stretch out long, spread through the toes, and see if you can feel like you're sitting up on your two sit bones. It might mean the knees need to bend, and lift up through the crown of the head. Good. Take a nice deep breath in and out. You can use your fingertips back behind you to keep your pelvis upright. Begin to point and flex your feet. We've done this a lot already today. Just kind of get those ankles moving. Good. And then when you're ready, bend your knees and plant your feet about in line with your sit bones and move that blanket out of the way. And lean back into the hands. Your fingertips are going to point toward the wall behind you. And the hands can be shoulder width apart, or they could even be a little wider. So this is my spacing that I've got. And what we're going to do is work with the pelvis first. We just did all this tipping and tilting of our pelvis, and I want you to feel how you can do that here. I want you to move your front hip bones toward your thigh bones and feel how that increases the curve of the low back. And then do the opposite. Think about letting the pelvic rim spill toward the floor and how that makes your low back more into like a hammock shape, right? Go back and forth a couple times. Move the tail, sweep the tailbone out from under you, move the front hips toward the thighs, then tuck the tail under you and feel the low back round, and then see if you can find a place that feels pretty neutral. So you've got a lumbar curve, it's not exaggerated. And then we're gonna move our awareness to our shoulders. So your fingertips are pointing back, and I want you to allow your shoulders, your scapula to kind of slunk up into your ears. So this is, I don't know, like if you're sitting in a ballpark watching a ball game or you're at the beach, here we are. And then push the floor away, broaden the shoulder blades, broaden the collarbones, draw the shoulder blades down the back. Now let them go up the back. So what we're doing is we're mobilizing our scapula, the shoulder bones on the back of the rib cage. Push the floor away, pull them down. Let them come up the back. That's like just letting gravity have you. They elevate, and then we have to activate some muscles to pull them down. And do that 2 more times. And if you need to, you can be up on your fingertips. You don't have to have the heels of the hands on the ground. Again, your hands can be shoulder width apart or wider, but see if you can feel those scapula moving. And then when you're ready, pull the scapula down and keep them down. And feel that pelvis. It's not too tilted forward. It's not too tilted backward. It's just nice and neutral. The crown of the head and the tailbone reaching away from each other. Ready? Can you bring your left foot up off of the ground into the air without changing that lift through the spine, and then set the left foot down? And the right foot, can it come up and then down? And keep alternating. See if you can feel your spine nice and lifted. We're working on strengthening our hip flexors right now. Those hip flexors that were just getting lengthened when we were doing our bridge pose. Now, if you're feeling like you're able to stay lifted here, I'm going to challenge you. And again, shoulders down, collarbones broad. Can left foot come up followed by right foot? And then left foot goes down followed by right foot. And then can right foot come up followed by left foot? And then right goes down followed by left foot. So left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left. Now, are your shoulders creeping up into your ears? Okay, catch your legs now. When you're ready to not have your hands behind you, catch your legs and keep going. So you're holding on to the back of the thighs and trying to keep this marching business going and trying to keep your spine nice and neutral. And if you're feeling like this is a piece of cake, You feel like you want to let go of your legs, you can, but make sure that we're not slunking back into our low back. Okay, just 2 more, or remember I invited you to rest whenever you need to rest. Good, and then be done. And say, thank you. No, don't throw anything at me. Okay, now we're gonna roll onto our abdomens. And if you need soft underneath you, if you're on a hardwood floor and you need to put a blanket down because your bones are hurting on the floor, please take care of yourself. So we're on our abdomen. The legs are lengthening back toward the wall behind us. They can be hip width apart. They could be wider than hip width apart. The tops of the feet and the knees are on the floor. And then the arms, you're bringing the arms in so that the elbows are either under the shoulders or a little forward of the shoulders. And you know, little babies, when they're like, I don't know, how many months old do you start putting them on their belly and they have tummy time? I don't know, like 3-4 months. I actually don't know because I don't have babies, but I know that this is a thing. This is how babies develop their spinal curves, is you put them on their bellies. When a baby's born, they only have a C curve. They have no lumbar curve. They have no cervical curve. They are curved in the shape that they were in the womb. And so to start developing our cervical curves and our lumbar curves, it's belly time. And it's good for adults too, for us to start gaining our curves back. So we're gonna let those shoulder blades glide up into our ears, and then push the forearms down, broaden the collarbones, draw the scapula down the back, and let them glide up into the ear. And then pull those scapula down, push the floor away with your forearm. So we're building some muscles underneath our armpits right now, the muscles that help to stabilize our scapula on our rib cage. And the muscles are under the armpits, and there's some that are in the low shoulder blade region, the low traps, that tend to be really weak. And when they're really weak, they don't work very well. And we start to get tension in the upper traps around the neck and shoulder. So when you're ready, just hold this position for a moment, reach back through the legs. Good. Feel your front low ribs swing into the body a little. Feel your navel pull back toward the spine, if that gives you a little extra support in your lower back, if you're feeling compressed. And then when you're ready, lower down, just make a pillow out of your hands and turn your cheek to one side. Take a couple breaths. Good, and then slide your hands under your shoulders and press yourselves up to your hands and knees, and then take a prayer pose. So if you need to, you can put a blanket underneath your knees. You're gonna take your sit bones and move them back toward your heels, just as far as your joints allow, and reach your arms way out in front of you so you can stretch your shoulders. The fingers are spread, the hands are firming down, the elbows are straight, so your triceps are engaged. And on your next inhale, we're gonna rock forward to our hands and knees, shoulders come over the wrists. And as you exhale, we're taking our sit bones back toward our heels, back into prayer pose. And so inhaling, we're pulling ourselves forward to hands and knees. And exhale, we're moving back to prayer pose. So nice, again, release for the lower back. We're moving our spines between a C curve, that curve we were in when we were in our mother's womb in prayer pose. And we're pulling ourselves to tabletop where all 3 curves exist. If the head is in line with the pelvis and the ribs and the pelvis are neutral. 2 more times, exhaling back to prayer. Nice opening for the shoulders. Inhaling back to tabletop. And again, back to prayer. And when you get to tabletop, pause there. Good. Press the arms straight. The hands are going to be under the shoulders. The elbows are straight. The elbow creases spin toward your thumbs. Look where you're, yep, there you go. Elbow creases spin toward the thumbs. And the shoulder blades draw down the back out of the ears. See if you can pinch your shoulder blades together on your back body without bending your elbows and without buckling your spine. And then do the opposite. Push the floor away and see if you can spread your shoulder blades apart. So you're pulling the shoulder blades together, your sternum melts toward the floor, and then you're spreading them apart without over rounding the spine. Back and forth a couple times. We're just today kind of trying to mobilize those shoulder blades on our back body. Good. And then when you're ready, see if you can keep them nice and broad. Collect your front ribs and your front hips together if you feel like you're hanging out in a big back bend. And see if you can press your right hand and your left shin down into the ground firmly so you feel stable. Pull your left arm back into shoulder extension. Roll the front of the shoulder away from the floor. So don't pull it up too high. I want everybody to come out and rest for a second because I want to show you something. So sit down on your heels or sit like cross-legged, but I want to show you something because this is important. So if you pull your shoulder, this is shoulder extension. We pull the shoulders back. Everybody has different amount of flexibility, but if you keep pulling them back and you're like, woo, I've got a lot of shoulder flexibility, what happens to this part of the shoulder? It actually ends up taking a nosedive into the front of the shoulder capsule and it strains into the muscles and the tendons in there. So what you want to do, and let's just come up to our feet. We'll come back to this in a second. Come up to your feet and stand in mountain pose. And actually, I'm sorry, you guys are getting to know me. I change my mind all the time. Find a patch of wall and stand in front of the patch of wall so that you're like 3 inches away from the wall. You're not touching it with anything. Your heels are 3 inches, maybe even 2 inches away from the wall, and you're just in mountain pose, okay? And then from here, think about your collarbones and let them broaden and open. Feel your head is over your shoulders, shoulders are over your hips, hips are over your ankles. Now take your hands to the wall. Good, they can be shoulder width apart. Do you want this wall here? Yeah, you can come join me. There you go. Well, I know it's good to observe. Sometimes I'm like, don't do it yet, watch me, but here, we'll all do it together. So take your palms to the wall, but keep your hips over your ankles. Keep your shoulders over your hips. So you're not leaning your shoulders into the wall. Move your shoulders off of the wall and just move your hands into the wall. Good, we're in shoulder extension. Now notice if in taking your hands to the wall, if the heads of the shoulders had to roll forward and your chest had to collapse. You might be too far away from the wall. Walk closer, lift that upper sternum, open the collarbones, broaden the front of the shoulders back, and press your hands actively into the wall now. Good, broaden the collarbones, lift the sternum, strengthen through the legs, lengthen your tailbone down. Good, take a couple more breaths. Good, Jerry, can your shoulders shift away from the wall a little bit, or is that good? Are you getting enough stretch right there? Okay. Good, 2 more breaths. It's pretty good work, isn't it? If it's not, press harder. This is really good strengthening for the back of the arms and the back of the trunk. All those muscles that get strained and lengthened and strained and long, we're activating them and they're going to help to hold us upright. Now, when you're ready, release. Good job. Okay, now come back to your yoga mat. Stand in mountain pose. Find your front ribs with your thumbs. Feel around for your front ribs, the pokey part. Feel around in there. And then when you're ready, keep your thumbs there and take your fingertips to your front hip bones. Okay, at least in that direction. And think about those 2 points kind of tethered together. If they move, when they move apart, we move into a back bend. When those points come close together, we move into spinal flexion. What we want right now is just neutral. Okay, now keep your fingers here, and I want you to bend the knees and move the tops of the thighs back so you hinge into chair pose. But your front hips and your front ribs have stayed glued together. Good. Now pull those arms into extension. Good. Imagine the wall behind you you're firming into, but don't let the head of the shoulder dive toward the floor. Pull it back. Good. And then come back up, hands to heart. Inhale. And then pull into that chair pose and find shoulder extension and feel that connection between the ribs and the hips, and then come up. Good. And we'll do 3 more of those. Feeling the corners of your feet, the big toe ball, the pinky toe ball, and the heel rooting down. The inner and the outer arches lifting up. Good. And then when you're ready, pause. And everybody go back to the wall, plant your hands shoulder height, and then walk away from the wall. So you're sending your arms into the wall and you're sending your hips into the center of the room. There's going to be a 90-degree bend or so at the hips. So you want to feel, this is our down dog standing up. You can do it on a wall, you could do it on a chair. The knees are bent a little bit if you have tight hamstrings so the pelvis can get organized. Toes are pointing forward, corners of the feet are grounded, and the ears are in line with or above the arms. Take 3 breaths here. Let that spine get nice and long. Good, Jerry, bring the back of your head toward the ceiling. There you go. Straighten through the arms if you can. Good. 2 more breaths. Soup, back of the head toward the ceiling and a little bend in the knees so that your lumbar curve can return. Sit bones lift. There you go. Yeah. All right, everybody go ahead and come up to standing. Wherever you are, in your house, with a chair, with a wall, come all the way up to standing. Good, I just wanted to stretch those shoulders a little more. So now we're gonna come back to the ground and I'll show you our movement. So this is really good movement for shoulders mobility and upper back and spinal strength. So what we're doing is, a little while ago, I had you on your hands and knees, and we're thinking about those front hips and front ribs kind of clipped, locked together so you feel that support. Watch this. I'm gonna pull my left arm into shoulder extension. It's not here, because then we're diving in the front of the shoulder joint. We're here. And then I'm gonna sweep that arm forward, the palm rolls toward the floor. Notice my arm's in my peripheral vision. And then I'm gonna sweep it back and forward. So we'll do that a couple times, and then we do the other side. The arm that's on the ground is stabilizing you, okay? So 2 hands on the ground, elbow creases spin forward, armpits hug toward the hips, abdomen is supporting you from the front. When you're ready, push your right hand down and your left shin down for stability, and pull your left hand back, palm to ceiling. There's your shoulder extension. Now sweep the arm forward, roll the palm to the floor, and then reach the arm back. We're trying to keep the ribs and the spine and the pelvis nice and quiet. Do that again. Feel the crown of the head and the tailbone reaching in opposition, so make sure you're not dropping your head. And then when you're ready, put your left hand down. Good, now it's left hand, right shin firming down. Pull your right arm back into shoulder extension. Roll the front of the shoulder away from the floor. Sue, find your lumbar curve. There you go. And then sweep that right arm forward and then reach it back. Palm rolls up toward the ceiling as the arm comes alongside the hips, and it rolls down toward the floor as the arm sweeps alongside the cheekbone. One more time. Good, and then set your right hand back down. Now, once you're here, 2 hands on the ground, armpits hugging down out of the ears. Left leg slides back, toes tuck under. Hips are level with the floor. Front ribs and front hips are tethered together. Lift your left leg slowly off the ground. Imagine there's like a 3-year-old on your leg and they're heavy. Now, it's up to you. If you feel like playing with your balance, the right arm pulls back. It sweeps forward. It sweeps back out to the side and back. And then the right hand comes to the floor. The left knee comes down. Second side, the right leg stretches back, the toes tuck under. And once you feel ready, lift the right leg up. Feel the right hand and the left shin firm down for stability. Now pull the left arm into extension. And then sweep it around and reach it forward. Remember, you don't have to do arm and leg. You could pick one or the other. You work where you need to work today. When you're ready, set the left hand down and move back into prayer pose. Good work. All right, we're going to come on to our right side when you're ready. And I'm going to turn the fan on higher that I never turned on. You guys have to be like, Katie, we're suffocating in here on a 100-degree day. We need you to turn the air on for us. There you go. I have one fan going. Don't worry, people at home. We have at least one fan going. Okay, so we're coming on to our right side, and you have a blanket or a block or something underneath your right cheek. The right arm is reaching forward, and the left hand is on your left hip, and your knees are stacked. It's like you're in a chair pose position, okay? So bring your, think about chair pose. Your ankles are in line with your knees, and your knees are in line with your hips. There's like a 90-degree bend. There you go, Nita. Bring those knees up even higher. So your shins are probably parallel with the long edge of your yoga mat, maybe. Now feel your right shoulder firming down into the ground and your right hip firming down into the ground, and lift your right waist away from the ground. And then think about that energetic connection between the front of your ribs and the front of your hips, and see if you can pull those points closer together, move them far away, and then bring them back together. Find a place that feels neutral to you. So you have a little concavity in your low back, not a big, huge back bend. You're not rounded in the low back. Now, when you're ready, stay there. Can you lift your left leg up off of your right leg so that your left knee, your left ankle and hip are all on the same plane? And then you're going to pull that leg back like you're poking a hole in the wall behind you with your toes into hip extension. Keep your pubic bone tethered to your sternum. And then bring that left knee like you're drawing a circle with your knee. Come up, back, and around to that hovering chair pose you were just in. So do that over and over again. Pull the left leg back like you're going to poke a hole in the wall behind you. And then lift the left knee up like you're drawing a big circle across the ceiling and then down the wall in front of you. And then do it again. Now, there's a really fancy word for this that I forgot. Basically, we're circling the femoral head around in the socket of the hip and getting all kinds of nice strengthening qualities from this action. As you're doing this, you want to make sure your pelvis isn't rolling back toward the wall behind you as you lift that knee up and bring it around. And you want to make sure that that relationship between the front hips and the front ribs is still there. You kind of just adjust it. Now, for a few rounds, go the other direction. Just keep circling, but go the other way around. Good. You could imagine you have a beach ball that you're holding behind your knee. So you keep that knee flexed as you're stirring that hip up and around. Good. And then when you're ready, rest. Rest your left knee on your right knee and just settle for a second. Good job. And then when you're ready, we're going to roll over. We're going to do the same thing on the second side. So go ahead and roll over. Find that side lying chair pose so that your right ear and your right shoulder and your right hip are on the same plane. And then your knees are in line with your hips and your ankles are in line with your knees. And that downward firming of the bottom leg and the bottom shoulder so that your waist Your left waist, in this case, can lift up. You can feel your obliques engage and support you. Feel that pelvic rib cage alignment. See if you can tip and tuck the ribs in the pelvis and feel your way toward neutral. And when you're ready, lift your right leg off of your left leg. So it's hovering. Now, point your toes and imagine there's a window behind you and you're just trying to poke that window with your toes. Find your hamstrings and your gluteal muscles. And then take that right knee like you're painting a circle with it across the ceiling, down the wall in front of you. And then poke the hole in the window again behind you and then go up and around with that knee. And your right hand gets to hang out on your right hip maybe, guiding it forward so that it doesn't roll backward toward the wall or the imaginary mirror behind you. Good, and then change directions when you're ready. Go the other way. Really nice movement for our hips. I had a student request a little bit of hip love today. And so here you go. I don't know if this is what she had in mind, but this is really nice for our hips. Now, when you're ready, just let your legs stack on top of each other for a moment and rest. Take a few breaths. And then when you're ready, roll onto your backs. So your gaze is toward the ceiling. And we're gonna take, when you get here, take your elbows. So actually, if you'd like to see what the heck I'm talking about, you can roll over and watch me and you can see where we're headed. I wanna guide you into a little bit of space making for your spine. So what I like to do is I push my elbows down and I kind of pull my shoulders up into my ears and I push my elbows into the floor and I try to drag my low back ribs away from my pelvic rib. And then I can move my head away from my shoulders. So it's this kind of dragging movement. If you think about it, your ribs are attached to your spine. So if you're moving your rib cage away from your pelvis, you're tractioning your spinal column. So let's do that together. See if I can talk you into it. You're laying on your back. You're going to kind of take those shoulders. We practiced this move earlier. Bring them up into the ears. That's like the only time you'll ever hear a movement instructor tell you to do that. Push your elbows into the ground and see if you can lift your ribs up and drag them away from your pelvis and then let them come down and then lift your head up and let it move away from your shoulder. So we just made a little space. Now take the arms out to the side perpendicular to your trunk and cross your right thigh nice and deep over your left thigh. So there's no gap between your thighs. And spill your legs across to the left. They don't need to come all the way to the ground. What's happening actually is that your pelvis is turning to the left and the ribs are not. And then bring the legs back up through the center and do that 2 more times. So it's like your front hip bones are turning and your navel are turning to look to the left and the legs are going along for the ride. And that's gonna maybe create a nice stretch out of the outer hip and your low back, the outer right waist, and then come back to the center and do that 1 more time. And again, the legs might not come all the way down to the ground. If they do, what might end up happening is your shoulder might pop off the ground, or you might feel like, I don't know, you're straining in your back. I don't want you to do anything that feels like a strain. Some of you might feel like your shoulders and your knees can come down because you have a really long torso, and that just works in your body. We all have different shaped skeletons. When you're ready, come back through the center, uncross, recross your legs to the second side. Left leg over right leg. And if you liked that spinal traction we did earlier, go ahead and do it again. Push the elbows down, drag the ribs away from the pelvis, head away from the shoulders, and then open the arms up and let the legs and the pelvis turn across to the right. just gently. And then maybe an exhale brings you back to the center. And inhaling, the legs across to the right and the gaze might roll to the left. And the exhale brings everything back to the center. And then this last time, we might just hang out there for a moment, or if it feels better to you to keep moving, keep moving. If it feels good to just linger in the twist for a moment, stay there. Feel the belly lifting and falling. And then ease your way back to the center, uncross your legs. And if it's comfortable for you to stretch your legs out long, if your lower back isn't complaining, then stretch the legs out long. Let them be wider than hip width apart. Let the arms open out to the side, palms to the sky. And the eyes can soften, or you could turn your gaze inward. Just closing them, up to you, and just feeling what it feels like to be in your body now after your asana practice. Noticing the movement of the breath that rolls in and out, where you notice the breath, maybe the belly lifting and falling, maybe that rib cage movement, maybe just the air rolling in through the nostrils and back out. The invitation to practice not doing. Just be still. Inviting your breath to deepen. Feeling back into your fingers and toes. Beginning to stir in the rest of the body. One knee might bend, and then the next. And then you could reach one of your arms back and roll toward it onto your side, using an arm as a pillow. And then when you're ready, you can come to sit upright. And if it makes it easier to sit, to have a little something under you, give yourself whatever height you need. I'm gonna sit on a blanket. So remembering, if we have tight hips, sometimes just a little layer of blanket can make it a little easier, less of a fight to bring that pelvis upright, to find that lumbar curve again, and the thoracic curve, the shoulders over the hips, the ears over the shoulders. As we find that plumb line, it's like the whole body exhales. Muscles don't have to strain to hold us upright. With an inhale, rolling our palms skyward. With an exhale, taking hands to heart, bowing inwardly. Thank you everyone for being here today. And if you're heading to the balloon races this weekend, have a wonderful time. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Leanne will be here next Wednesday with chair yoga. Namaste. Good. How'd it go, David? You feel okay?
Very much so. I love the way you do this. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you for the feedback. Okay. All right. And everyone else at home, thank you for coming. Glad you could be here today. We'll see you again soon, I hope.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you, Katie.
You're welcome. Thank you. Is that Jackie?
Yeah, that's Jackie.
Okay.
Thank you.